we ready to get going here? Everybody ready with their technology over there? Okay, sounds great. So welcome everyone to the Peoria County Election Commission. We are happy to host this Defending Democracy press conference today. I would first like to thank the Illinois People's Action Group for suggesting this event and bringing the 3 election administrators together to discuss elections with you. My name is Elizabeth Gannon. I am the Executive Director here at the Election Commission. I was recently promoted to the Executive Director position. However, I held the Assistant position for the past 15 years. I would also like to introduce my fellow speakers for today. The far end is John Ackerman. He is the County Clerk for Tazewell County. He was elected in 2018 and has quickly made a name for himself. He currently sits on the Legislative Committee for the Illinois Association of County Clerks and Recorders. Scott Erickson, here in the middle, is the County Clerk in Knox County. Scott was elected in 2004 and has been very active in several state organizations, including a past president of the Illinois County Officials Association. There's so many acronyms.
Too many letters to understand. But.
So there is quite a bit of elections knowledge here today in the room, and I hope that everyone in attendance takes advantage of that. There is a quote on the wall behind you, right above our front counter. It's by Al Smith, and it says, "It's not the voting that's democracy, it's the counting." This press conference is intended to give the public and the press the opportunity to address concerns, ask questions, and to hopefully gain back confidence and trust that your vote is being counted fairly and accurately. So with that, I would like to open it up. If anyone on the table would like to start.
Well, thank you for hosting this today. Thank you, Reverend Bushy, for organizing this today. Just this past weekend, I was part of a previous one with Kathy Michael, the McLean County Clerk, and Aaron Ammons, the Champaign County Clerk in Bloomington, just last weekend. I thought the program went real well. It was a similar setup of just allowing the public to ask questions, and it really opened, some people had some misunderstandings about how we all work together. I think the big thing that came out of there is they didn't realize that Scott and I, Elizabeth, you and I, we talk frequently. The process is the same. What we do for our counties, our roles are a little different in just how our counties are made up, but we run into the similar things that need to be taken care of. And there is an association of county clerks where we've divided the state into 5 zones? 4 zones, all radiating out of this area, but the 3 of us are in the same zone. Kathy in McLean County and Aaron Ammons in Champaign are part of a different one, but we meet once a month together to discuss situations that arise, legislation that's being proposed, just to discuss things that are taking place. How can we improve the services that we provide? And it is a wealth of knowledge, especially, I'll mention when I came in 2018, Scott was one of them, and Don Gray in Sangamon County that I contacted frequently with, hey, how are you guys doing this? How can we improve what we do in Tazewell County? And both of them were a wealth of knowledge and really helped out quite a bit. And that's what the association's great for. And I think some of the citizens in McLean County just didn't realize that county clerks throughout the state communicate like that. This is nothing unusual for us. As a matter of fact, your predecessor, Tom Bride, and I did a similar event in 2020, both in the primary and the general election with the League of Women Voters from East Peoria, that really helped answer quite a few questions, similar questions to what still exists today, but really helped out through that election cycle. So thank you again for hosting this event and for inviting me to be here. With that, I'll turn over to our elderly statesman.
Wow.
My friend, Mr. Erickson.
Yes, well, thank you. Yes, appreciate everyone for the organization and giving us the opportunity to come and address any questions or concerns and things you have. I feel old. I mean, the elder statesman, but I've been in office for 18 years, and it feels like a blink of an eye. Things have it's amazing how time has flown. But before being honored with being an elected official, I actually worked in campaigns. So I had the experience on the other side of being the candidates and working with those candidates and trying to get those votes out. So when I came into office and was elected in, and appointed in and elected in, I thought I had a pretty good bead on exactly what the office did on election sides of things. And I was not exactly 100% accurate in that. I knew a little bit about what was going on, but when you get into these positions and learn the back end operations of things, all the requirements, all the things that we are required to do and need to do to make sure that these elections are run smooth and efficient, there's a whole different world behind that curtain that you don't see. But we want to make sure that the voters and the constituents and the candidates themselves too know that we as election officials have that ultimate goal in mind of making sure that these elections are run smooth, fair, and efficient, no matter what type it is, whether it's a presidential year election where you've got millions of dollars being spent on advertising, or it's the small consolidated elections with school board and township races where they're spending, if they spend $50 on their campaign, they're spending a lot. We treat all these elections the same. They're all very important. Your vote is very important to us. We always encourage voters to make sure that they get out and vote, get educated about voting. Just don't go with the sound bites. Just don't go with the quips and things. Talk to those candidates face to face. It's hard for somebody to lie to you face to face and say, I'm going to do exactly this, when they don't really mean they're going to do exactly that. Get it straight from the horse's mouth. Get that information, become educated voters, and then use your voice. That is the most important thing. Candidates need to know voters have that voice. They're the ones that put us in these offices to do the job. So we need to make sure that we're doing that job for them and efficiently for them. So with that, I will wrap up mine.
Well, actually, just jumping on what you said real quick. No, because I think you're right, and I think that was a point that needs to be brought up more too. Illinois is different than many other states in the nation where the elections are organized and led from the top down. So there's leaders in Springfield that dictate how elections will be done, and then there's just people in the field doing it. Elections in Illinois are run from the bottom up. So when you're here in Peoria, Elizabeth is the election authority. She is the ultimate one making the decisions. In Knox County, it's Scott, and in Tazewell County, it's me. So are our elections being manipulated? Well, it would have to be Scott, because the State Board of Elections does nothing other than collect results and report. They don't control the election. It's Scott. In Peoria, it's Elizabeth. In Tazewell, it's me. So I think Illinois does have an advantage in building some trust and opportunity, and that you don't have to go to Springfield to see how elections are run. You just got to go to where your election authority is, your local election authority. They're the ones, your friends and your neighbors are the ones that are running this vital process in democracy for you. It's not some stranger in Springfield or some foreign entity. It is individuals right here. I'm a bit different than my colleagues over here in that I have the blessing of having our election vendor, be right from my county as well. So I'm the only one in Illinois that can say that because the only vendor there, but right there in Tremont is my vendor. So again, my people the equipment being sold, they know it's sold by a gentleman right there in Tremont, their friend, their neighbor that they see at the grocery store. So these are advantages that Illinois has, and I don't know if we speak enough as election authorities about that this is where that trust is built. It's here on the local level. There is nothing really that the state can do. They just collect the results and report it out. As a matter of fact, you call the state, they reflect them back to us because they know the law as well and the way it's laid out. So it is different in Illinois than it is in other states, and it's an advantage I hope that we take advantage more of.
Absolutely.
The other thing I was going to mention was this here isn't, I know it's been advertised as something new, but this type of event isn't anything new. It really, I would say it started before 2016, but was really highlighted in 2016 and became an issue. When I took office in 2018, we were still answering questions about how we do it. It had ramped up quite a bit, and it has continued ever since then. Just so events like this, we continue to hold them, but the purpose is to try to tear apart those misconceptions, those misunderstandings. So now is the chance for anybody to ask any question you have. We're here to answer.
So if I just want to play off of one thing that he said with respect to the state and their us having different voting equipment. So in Illinois, each election jurisdiction can make their own decision as to what election equipment or vendor they want to buy from. And so I believe, do you guys have the same thing?
We do not.
Well, so we all three have a different voting system in place. But with that being said, every system is certified at the state and the federal level before we can even vet that vendor to come in and approach us. So they have to go through that process at both the state and the federal level before we can even begin that evaluation process. So I think that's important to realize as well, that they have gone through those two levels. Yes, ma'am.
Is the vote by mail different in the different counties? Is that ballot that's different, or is that state?
It's driven by state statute, so the way we handle it may be different in that by far Elizabeth is going to have way more vote by mail come through than Scott or I is going to have, just because of the sheer size. I'm close, but my public still decides, my citizens are still using in-person early and election day voting more than we're using vote by mail. Peoria, on the other hand, has seen vote by mail, I believe, surpass your early voting, hasn't it?
Just in 2020 with
Just
the
in 2020.
pandemic. So we're back to, with permanent vote by mail, obviously we have seen a huge increase in vote by mail. We have sent out over 15,000 vote by mail ballots in Peoria County. But what I would really like to stress about vote by mail is that no voter is receiving a ballot that has not requested it. Okay, you have to request a vote by mail ballot in order to receive it. And when it leaves our office, it has a unique identifier on it. So I know that this ballot is attached to this voter. So when that comes back, you can see that it's attached to that voter, and that's how we do the verification process.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another difference in Illinois, is that we are a no ID state. So we verify through signature verification, and that requires one Democrat and one Republican judge to look at every voter's signature before they can move through the process, right? So whether you're voting by mail, whether you're voting early, or you're voting in your polling place on election day, you're going to have two election judges, one from each political party, verify that your signatures match before you can move on.
Now, something that has changed a little bit with our offices is this is the first year that we were mandated by the state of Illinois to mail out before the election mailers letting our voters know that they can register for vote by mail, that's available to them. That has shifted the workload a bit in our offices, at least I've seen it, and I believe others I have talked about, where we're used to seeing a slow ramp up. So the requests for vote by mail keep building, the amount of people coming in for early vote keep building. That flipped the process where on day one I mailed out, you mentioned yours, I mailed out 7,000 vote by mail ballots in Tassville County. Well, we never mailed them out on day one like that, so that has shifted the workload because now we're receiving them throughout this process as well. I think it actually, there was a benefit to that, which is the election judges were in my office earlier, and instead of being rushed at the end of the process, they're being able to space the work out over this entire thing. But it has changed the demographics too. I wouldn't have had election judges in my office doing vote by mail only at this period in previous elections. So there's a trade-off there. We'll have to see if that continues that way in future elections, but I think because we're mandated to keep mailing those cards out, I think it will be continued that way. But it is a reversal in the workflow from where we've been in previous years. And then on the vote by mail, I was just going to finish too that there may be individual ways we do it a little different in our office, like again, because of the workflow, the amount, volume, but the safeguards that Elizabeth was talking about, that's established in state statute, so that is followed by every election authority in the state. So she mentioned the election judges taking a look, and a group of them taking a look at each signature and verifying them. That's in the statute. That we keep and retain the request and the ballot, match them up and keep them together. That's part of it. All of that stuff's laid out, so the rules we all follow are the same. There just may be, because of volume in some areas, different individual setups.
Yes, Teresa.
So I have a two-part question. So it was a directive from the state of Illinois to send out permanent vote by mail ballot applications.
Correct.
So is it true that those vote, once that's processed and this person gets a permanent vote by mail ballot, there's no expiration date on those, so that if someone dies or moves, that ballot is going to keep going back until maybe it, I don't know, hopefully returned by the postal service is not forwardable, but that doesn't always happen. It is delivered, and our voter rolls are not very clean. I mean, they could be cleaner. Let's just say that our voter rolls could be cleaner. So what do you say to, what is needed to fix that so we're not continuously sending out live ballots to a deceased voter or someone that has moved? And then part two of my question is third parties' involvement with our election, to me and many others, is causing distrust in the process. So you've got third party people sending out valid applications. Why is that allowed? And then you've also got third parties involved in, Zuckerbucks came through Peoria, I believe, as intercivic grant. I would have to look through my notes to say for sure that paid for drop boxes, but in general, the Zuckerbucks went out to pay for things that, by accepting money from third parties, it does cause distrust. And also allowing others to host this forum or to sponsor this forum when that organization is not obviously from the website you can tell that they are not partisan. So that also causes distrust.
Well, let me answer in reverse.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
I should have taken notes.
Let me answer in reverse order. Building trust is what this is all about. Again, it's the opportunity to welcome people in and answer their question. As far as individuals hosting it, just within this past year, I've been with the Republican Party at a event, ballot integrity event that they had, asking questions about the process. My staff have been at Republican women's groups talking about their questions they had about how the process works. They're definitely partisan organizations. Tom Bride and I did this previously with the League of Women Voters. They're nonpartisan.
They're not.
There's the retired university professors that I've talked with this. Their association called us in. We're constantly meeting with any and every
But
group.
you're not allowing them to sponsor press conferences. I mean, you go and talk to people, but is this normal to allow?
Actually, the event in Bloomington with the Republican Party, there was a press conference associated with that. They were invited in to film it and to be part of it, and there was a news article off that. The other ones, I agree with you. And the League of Women Voters one, that one was a press conference designed on purpose that way because it magnifies the volume of the message getting out. Now, I don't think any of us have allowed any of those previous ones, and I don't see how this one could be manipulated to deliver a message. Because the way that we're just presenting and answering the information, I don't see how that would be there. But I understand the question there. Building trust, though, is opening the door for everybody to come in and ask their questions. When you asked about Zuckerbucks, we used it in Tazewell County as well. It was offered to election authorities throughout the nation. I used it to give hazard pay, which I believed was desperately needed for my election judges. So I used all of the Zuckerbucks that I received for that purpose. There were no strings attached to it. I think that's one of the misconceptions is there's been a lot of gossip and innuendo that tied you somehow to something. There wasn't. And it's not anything that's available this election cycle for any election authority. So when there's a grant available, I take advantage of it because I wanted to give them hazard pay to begin with because I believed that they deserved it. If I didn't have to use taxpayer dollars to do that, that's something I want to do. I want to try to take advantage of that so I can lower the cost. It's always a balancing act of lowering the cost to the taxpayer while delivering the best service possible to the citizens. So no, I grabbed it up quickly. I know some other county clerks had questions. I explained to them why I was taking advantage of it and utilizing it. Every one of them made their own independent decision, though. And I'll allow you guys in a minute to explain how you used it, but that's how I used it.
You did a great job, Kevin.
And I'm trying to think through your process. if I go back to your original question, it was on,
Third parties sending out.
Yep,
Well, or
that we
just,
can't-
no, the state. Actually, third parties was second, but the state themselves directing.
Oh, yes.
These
So
mailings, and they don't have expiration dates.
we can't control third parties mailing out those applications because it's
Part of the statute.
it's freedom of speech as well. It's allowing them to advertise to their groups the methods that are available. And I'll get back to that in a minute too, because on the state one, that is something that can be controlled, but currently the statute reads that we are to mail them out for every general and consolidated election, not for primaries. So you will be getting another one in April because that is a consolidated election. So we had them here and we had them then for the municipal election. So every year we're mailing them out. Is that something that could be changed? That's beyond us. That's up to the legislature. We just process it as the law says and do the election. I will say two things on that. One is I use the card. We're only required to do it about permanent vote by mail. We could add to it whatever we wanted. So on my cards that went out in Tazewell County, it advertised all 4 ways that you had the right to vote. Permanent vote by mail for just that election, in-person early voting, and election day. I wanted to make sure that every citizen had all 4 options on that card available to them. I just thought that that was a way we could do it. Another thing that we've opened up, and this is actually, you talked about the voting rolls, this is actually helping with that as well then, in that we can start cleaning the voting rolls based on official election mail from our office being mailed to the voter. That normally is the voter registration card, and we do a purge of the system. We're required to every other year to mail new voter registration cards. And if those are returned to us as non-deliverable, we're to be looking into why they weren't deliverable and starting to take steps to remove them from our voting rolls. The statute only reads that it is official election mail. It doesn't say voter registration card. An application for vote by mail is official election mail being mailed from my office to you. So when we got returned a ton, about 5,000 vote by mail registration cards from voters that had moved away or had died, like you indicated, or other reasons, we take that now every year as an opportunity to clean up our voter rolls again by utilizing them to launch the investigation into is that voter there. So I'm taking advantage of the law that was made by the legislators to further clean and purge our system out as quickly as we can to keep our voting rolls as accurate as possible.
So what about no expiration date on those, when the ballots go out?
That's part of the law, and yeah, they are mailed out there. But remember, the ballot may be being received by somebody that's deceased. But when it's returned, it still has to have the signature. We're just not processing ballots. So when it gets returned, the election judges are still taking a look at it and still looking through there. Additionally, I know that there are groups that are looking at watching those rolls versus death rates to see when individuals throughout the state have passed away. You sign that ballot and you return it and you falsify a signature. That is voter fraud. Furthermore, it's a second federal charge, which is mail fraud, because if you mailed it, then you've created mail fraud. So you don't just get prosecuted with one federal charge, it is 2 federal charges that will come after you.
But you won't be able to tell who signed it. I mean, no one's really going to get pursued with fraud unless it's the spouse of a dead, person that signed for their spouse and mailed it back in.
Well, that's actually not accurate. In Madison County, there is a current case before Kwame Rayul's desk where in the Democrat primary, they had found ballots that were signed by the same individual repeatedly turned into their office. The procedures that are in place caught that, brought it to the attention of the local prosecutor, the state's attorney. He had to recuse himself because he knew both of the judicial candidates that were involved, and it's been elevated to the Attorney General's office. That is being moved through the system, and that is proof that the system of receiving, validating the signature, and being able to find out who did it, because there are individuals they are looking at that did this. We can figure those methods out and be able to do it. Remember, if you're using a Dropbox, all of our Dropboxes are 24-hour monitored. We do have the ability to see who is putting those ballots into Dropboxes. That is evidence that can be brought before courts for prosecution if anybody should be found to be manipulating the process that way. In New Jersey's another case, there was one in the 2020 primary where the entire primary was thrown out and had to be rerun before the general election because a New Jersey election official was manipulating the process by stuffing the ballot box. Again, the system worked. It caught what was there. It's not Illinois' system, it was New Jersey's, but he was prosecuted. He was thrown out of office. He's got federal charges coming against him already. It is a case that's moving forward. So these things have happened. These individuals have been caught. So to say that you couldn't do anything with it, no, there are ones that are being pursued, including right here in Illinois in Madison County.
So it sounds like the drop boxes are quite a source of attempted fraud.
I don't have any in Tazewell County, but I wouldn't say that just because they are 24-hour monitored. Again, that signature is being checked. In the New Jersey case, they were. But in the Madison case, I don't know if they received them in a drop box or if they were hand delivered to the office. I'm not for sure. So I couldn't jump to that conclusion that ballot boxes are a source of further election fraud. It's just one of the examples I mentioned included that.
Thank you.
I have a question for Elizabeth. It's
Well, real quick, did I say something that, I mentioned how I use the Zuckerbucks. Did I mention anything? Felt like I overran that comment, so I wanted to give you guys an opportunity.
No.
You are just fine.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
My question was about, John had mentioned the drop boxes having 24-hour monitoring. As of a couple weeks ago, I know the one at the North Peoria Library, they refused that.
No, they refused to allow it to be live streamed. So it is still monitored.
It is still monitored 24
Oh, yes.
hours.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
That feed is continuous. It's just they are not allowing us to publicly put that out for anyone to view it. They saw that as an invasion of privacy for their patrons attending the library.
Okay.
But no, it does have a video camera on it.
Okay.
I think there was a question in the back.
So with all the drop boxes in Peoria County, are they monitored by camera?
Yes.
And so who checks that camera? Is it 24 hours a day?
Yes.
And who checks that?
We check it if a problem arises, we can go back and look at it. It's a security camera. So we're not going out and checking it unless there is an issue that arises that we need to go and look at that footage. It is there for us to do that.
Okay. And I wanted to make another comment about the Zuck Bucks because I'm working with a campaign that has had Peoria County as being a moderate risk for fraud because of the drop boxes and because of the Zuck Bucks. So where did the Peoria County funds go for Zuck Bucks? Because that was Mark Zuckerberg, and I know the movie's out there and everybody knows about it. The 2000 Mules where they dumped a bunch of it in. So one, we've never got disclosed what happened with the Zuck Bucks here in Peoria County. So that's one part I would like answered first, and then I'll continue if I could get an answer where the Zuck Bucks went for Peoria County.
Sure. Well, I was not the one that spent that money, so it was my predecessor, Tom Bride. I have a general idea of where that money was spent, but it's very easy for me to go back and find that for you. We did use it for hazardous pay for our election judges. I know that a big chunk of it went towards that, but I'm not sure. I would be happy to get that information to you. Obviously, it's public record, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
Yeah, because when you don't disclose that with people, it raises a red flag.
It would have been disclosed in our meetings. All of those have to be approved by our board. All of our bills are approved by our board and how we use our funds. So it is disclosed, and I'm happy to get that for you.
Okay. And the other comment about the Republicans, the Democrat judges is currently, I'm being told by the GOP that the Republicans don't have enough judges, and a lot of times those other people are appointed. So how are those people appointed when there's not enough of the Republican judges?
I don't understand what you're asking.
So there has
What
to
do
be
you
a
mean
Republican and a
appointed?
Democrat. So if there's not a Republican judge, so how is that seat filled if there's not somebody at the poll on the Republican side?
There's never a polling place could not open unless it had one Democrat and one
I think
Republican.
they're asking how when you have a polling place without one of the election judges, what's the process of nomination?
we would pull from another polling place. So if we had an extra Republican judge down the street, we would call them, you need to please head over here, that their Republican judge didn't show up. But we cannot process voters until there is a bipartisan representation in the polling place.
And actually, an additional step in the statute that isn't used, but one that's there is, if that occasion should occur, the election judges are actually told, as individuals walk in, they are to ask, we need a Republican to do this process. Are you willing to serve as an election judge? It's an antiquated part of the statute that exists still. I know in our classes we still teach it, so that if that incident should occur and voters are coming in, find a Republican in the crowd, they're the election judge. Bring them in and get them sworn in to serve as the election judge. I think the message I've tried to get out with that is, because I have it the other way around, I have a hard time finding enough Democrats to seat for election judges. Everybody should be signing up to be an election judge if you're available. We have our doors open. We're not refusing people. We're not turning you away. We actually need your help in finding election judges. So if having the right amount of election judges in the polling locations is something that's important, it's important to us too. So please work with us to get election judges to come serve. I can't think of a time in the last 4 years I've been in office that I've heard any of us say, please don't give me any more election judges. We're on the other side going, please sign up to be an election judge. We're begging you to help us. So I know.
On that note, though, I do also think that it's important to point out that when you sign up to be an election judge, you do have to have voter history showing that you are consistently polling that party ballot, because you are representing that party. And a lot of times we have people that sign up that only vote in general elections, and they don't have that history. So unfortunately, until they vote in a primary election, they cannot serve as an election judge.
As a matter of fact, it's again an antiquated part of statute, but the only people who don't have a choice on what party ballot they pick in the primary are election judges. If you sign up as an election judge and you say that you're a Republican, you cannot by statute pull a Democrat primary ballot in future elections until you're no longer serving as an election judge. You've declared that is the group that you're representing, and by statute you're required to remain with that party. The only one, elected officials, we can pull different ballot styles. Precinct committeemen, party officials, they can pull different party ballots anytime they want, but election judges are locked in. Something that's antiquated in the system, but still there.
And we've had that situation happen. We had a judge that wanted to vote for a particular candidate in a party. They innocuously did that. It comes back to us, we see the vote, and it's like, we called them in. You switched parties on us. You were assigned and voted as this party, and you pulled the opposite party's ballot. Well, yeah, I wanted to vote for this particular candidate. I'm like, well, I didn't ask you that. I just want to make sure that you did understand that now you are no longer eligible to serve as that party's judge because you've stepped across the line. Oh, I didn't realize that. So we were then able to they were no longer serving as an election judge. They waited until the next primary. They picked the party ballot that they originally were set. We got them back into the cycle of things. But it's that thing that they just don't understand and don't realize. But when I go out, at least in Knox County, we try to talk a lot to student groups. We try to get into the schools, getting those students that are getting ready to become voter eligible, to be able to get that fire in the belly, for lack of a better term, to be able to say, yes, I want to be a voter. I want to make sure that I'm going out and doing this, not just in the big fancy elections, but in every election after that. And when we're pitching them on the importance of voting, we're also pitching them on the fun and exciting job as an election judge. Because it's a lot of times the technology sometimes will scare some of our older judges. When we moved from punch card to the optical scanning equipment, we lost a portion of our judges that just say, I'm not going to do this new technology. We added touchscreen machines, and we had the same situation. They moved away from us because they were worried they didn't like the computers, they didn't like the machines. The younger population are more comfortable with that technology, and therefore seem to be a little bit quicker on the uptake for being willing to step in and say, I'm willing to be able to learn how to touch that machine, and be able to be the one that starts it up and closes it down at the end of the night. So trying to get them at a younger age moving through the thing helps us in the long run, because now we've got those election judges that are working through. Now, high school students are going to graduate, they're going to go off to college, so we train them, we have them for a year, we end up losing them to wherever they go to school. Hopefully they come back home, and when they do come back home, we get them But we also like to think too that wherever they go to at school,
They're serving.
college kids are always looking for money, and that's a good way for those college kids to make a little extra money. So we're helping whatever county and state that they land in by training them at least in how we do the election parts in Illinois. But it's always, like John said, it's always a chore to make sure that we've got that pool of people. And sometimes they shove the election to June this year. So we have a group of judges that can't work in the March primaries because they're not back from being snowbirds. So that's great. We'll have the June election. There'll be no problem. My snowbirds will be back. They were back, but then we had some of the middle-aged ones that were on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
So it changed the whole dynamic of now how do we adjust and make sure we get those balances and flows. But being able to have those judges in a pool that we can then say, yeah, why don't we have this many Republicans, this many Democrats, and kind of a floater pool that we can adjust and shuffle, helps be able to situations where we have someone that decides they're going to not do something, or they get sick or whatever. So be able to have that concern. But yes, always looking for election judges. We always encourage them to come and sign up and get educated, because it's an educational part for them as well, for them to see more of how that process goes. It's not just coming in and get your ballot filled in an oval. There's all kinds of steps before, during, and after that they do.
Sure.
Thanks. So yeah, I have a name of someone, I've heard a couple people say that they have signed up to be election judges and they haven't been called. She might have somebody too, but so even if someone, let's say they don't have a history in primaries, if they could at least get a call so that they know, hey, this is the reason why, maybe go over it with them. I think the person I'm going to give you, I mean, they did vote in the primaries, so I don't know why he didn't get a call, but so I just wanted to make that point. But I also have a question and a comment. So I'd like to know what the three of you know about source code, and have you ever examined them in our election systems?
Well, in our elections in Illinois, we don't have source code as an issue because none of our equipment, any of it, is allowed to be. Let me back up a second. So she mentioned we have three different vendors. I think there are 4 major vendors in the state of Illinois. They still have to abide. They're selling. It's the same product, just it's kind of like buying a station wagon. You can have a Ford, Chevy, it's still just a station wagon. It's the same thing with these vendors. It's just their name on the equipment, but they operate under the same principles by the state constitution. So in Illinois, you are not allowed to have any election equipment hooked up for live reporting or anything with a receiver or any way receiving information. It's something that they scan through and have to have certified with the state.
Who is verifying that before the actual election, though?
We register our equipment every year with the State Board of Elections and have it certified before every election. We have it tested before every single election. That's the public test that we offer. That's where it's physically inspected and tested. And all that's available for the public review. I live stream my public screening testing. I don't know how many people watch it. It's boring for me as well, but we do put it out there and live stream it so that the public can see it, because it's a process that's open. And I've taken the time, Tom and I did last time, to tear our equipment apart with the League of Women Voters and show there's no receiver in there. Your refrigerator at your house is probably smarter than, if it's a new refrigerator, than our election equipment, because it has a receiver. It can get information electronically. Our equipment can't receive anything. It is.
Okay, but unless, so the reason why I asked that is because there was, for everyone else here, the source code is the list of human readable instructions that a programmer writes that a machine can understand and execute.
Yep.
So in 2004, Clint Curtis, a computer programmer that has done work for NASA and the Department of Transportation, he testified under oath to a Democrat panel, including Maxine Waters and Jerry Nadler, that in October of 2000, he was asked by Congressman Tom Feeney to write a prototype to rig an election to make it 51 to 49. He said this would never be known by any county official conducting the elections, and there is no way to prevent it from happening either.
There is, in that he has excluded Illinois from that list. And that's because Illinois statute does not allow for receivers or for source coding to be used in the election equipment in any way.
So how can you identify if there is a source code? And
there's no way for there to be any type of source code, because we're not broadcasting information out for information to be uploaded in. And Illinois is one of the few states in the nation that requires every single vote have a paper ballot. You can't have any votes cast without a paper ballot, and we're required to maintain those paper ballots for
22 months.
thank you. Thanks. Looking for the numbers, scrambling, for 24 months.
Okay,
So
so-
we rerun those elections in a sample audit following the election.
Okay, can I finish my comment?
Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
So, okay. So speaking of that, there was people I know all over Illinois were requesting the data on the 2020 election, and we're not able to get that data. So, the cast vote record. For various reasons were given, but.
That one's actually a great one to answer. That record doesn't exist.
So then what is the record then?
The
that
record is the
keeping-
tally of the votes that we have. The cast
That
record.
doesn't show each vote though, like how.
Unfortunately, that report was frivolously invented in Kansas. It was at an event in Kansas where they discussed that. That is one state, and that's where I was going to go.
You might not have it with yours, but I
No,
believe
they don't
that
have it either. It's not in Illinois systems at all.
I don't think that that's true.
Our
But
fourth-
anyway, can I finish? I'm sorry. Okay. So, back to this testimony. So anyway, he said the only way that anyone would know if there was a source code built into these machines is if you were to look at the machine before anybody else tampered with it. And then also, back to your point about paper ballots, the only other way to know would be to check that you would do a hand count of paper ballots after the election, and then you would compare that with the machine count.
Yep, we do
So-
that.
Well, we don't do that.
We do. Yes, you
we
do.
do.
We do a
You're
5%
doing-
sampling ballot of
No,
every
no,
election.
the full, like, that's not.
Well, McHenry County did exactly what you asked for, and what they found was the election judges were in error. The election judges miscounted the election when
Well,
they
that's-
did they did this just in 2020. He pulled out the results and ran the election and allowed the election judges to come in, and even though it violates that statute, he allowed for that to take place. And the election judges miscounted, hand counting the votes, because your eye, looking at a little dot, you lose track of where you're at. They were wrong on, I think the percentage was 10% they were off by, having them audited again. So, and it was just one election he audited that way, but he showed that the tabulators, all they're doing is they're just dumb adding machines. They're just counting the amount of black dots. That's all they do.
They could have something in there though that.
They cannot.
Unless you created it, I don't know how you can
Well, okay,
really
Jody,
verify that.
this is what,
But-
how I would like to, this is what I would just like to address to this. So the source code, we've covered that,
Mhm.
okay? We do not have source code in Illinois. A way that you can prove that is by the public test that we do. We run a public test, which is, it's a logic and accuracy test, okay? We come up with a set of ballots, and we know exactly how we're going to vote those ballots. So we know what the results should be, okay?
But there has to be a certain number of votes for you to be able to figure out that there is something embedded in it.
But I could count how many I need. You are knowing how many you have.
She's saying there's a threshold before
Yes.
it triggers it.
And really, you would want to have a cybersecurity person check to see what really is in there. I mean, is that
We do that.
happening?
We have a Cyber Navigator program throughout the state that we all utilize, which
So
includes.
the same place, or is it?
No, as a matter of fact, so, and this is a good segue, I guess, to address that. So Illinois is leading in the nation. It's very unique in having this Cyber Navigator Program partnership. In 2016, the election was, not the election, the information was hacked. They entered Kankakee County. We know exactly how the Russians did it. They hacked Kankakee. They transmitted, it was Russians. They transmitted into the State Board of Elections, and they stole the voter database. The funny thing is, and I mentioned this at all of them because I think it's just funny, if the Russians had walked up to our counter and said, "I'd like to see your voter rolls," I would have handed them the voter rolls because we give them out to everybody who asks for them. And when they got the file that they stole, it got scrambled. So it had my name, Scott's address, and Elizabeth's vote history. It was a useless file, but they stole from the State Board of Elections. You rob a bank of a penny, you rob it of $1 million, you robbed a bank and you just destroyed that institution's reputation. So the state of Illinois, I don't brag often about what they do, but they took this serious and they really worked on how to fix this. And what they did was formed a partnership, the Cyber Navigator Program, which all of us in the state of Illinois are a part of. We all signed in to be a member of this. And it is a joint communication system from the local level, so me at the local level, my sheriff's office is tied into it, up to the state National Guard, the state police, and to the State Board of Elections, then further to the FBI, CIA, Department of Homeland Security, under Trump's administration, all of those organizations, feeding all of these warnings and notifications back to us about what's taking place. We have utilized this in Tazewell County to stop numerous cyber attacks that have taken place on our systems. By the way, I know there were chuckles about we being hacked in 2016. We now know that 5 other states were as well, and they just didn't know it. So Illinois was. We knew it, we identified it, and we fixed it. Other states are now copying Illinois' model of this because it's a unique partnership of information sharing both ways to allow us to know what's going on. And that's key too, because when those cyber attacks that hit me, Scott got them as well. So did Elizabeth, because they're lazy, they copy and they just attack randomly everybody. Now, Illinois' advantage in this process is there are 109 election authorities, so you have to hack all 109 of us to achieve anything. And we all have different operating systems, so it makes it extremely difficult. We're lucky that way. The states, the other 5 that got hacked, you only had to hack the Secretary of State's office or the election authority for the state, so it made it a lot easier. So Illinois has benefited from that, but this Cyber Navigator program, the state installed a secured fiber optic line to each of our offices from the Capitol building, so that when we communicate information concerning the election, it's sealed, it's secured. There isn't any way to hack it, to tap it, because it's not on public airways. That's what happened in 2016. We were using public utilities to communicate. We don't do that anymore. Every single office is run through this new system. That cost quite a bit of money that the state invested into making sure that the network was aligned. You guys all know fiber optic, trying to get a fiber optic line to your house, how expensive it is. Can you imagine all 109 through the state of Illinois receiving this? The FBI, CIA bulletins that we receive, is it every other day or is it sometimes daily? We know, we know what's being attempted. Matter of fact,
They're the ones that are attempting it.
well, we know that Russia, China, Iran, we know that there are internal individuals that have done it.
Just like your cybersecurity, who's the ones that own those companies?
Yeah,
Did you read
that's
about
what I-
Connect in Michigan?
Well, my cybersecurity official is in Tazewell County. I've hired a local firm to navigate that for me.
Okay, and who, okay,
Who do
all right.
these?
He polices our
Like, well, like
system.
Connect, it's got all the poll work, that company in Michigan, it's all tied to China. So don't say, that's where the trust is who's running the companies.
But again, that gets back to the advantage of Illinois over other states where each local official is deciding that on their own. Each individual is tying into the companies they want to partner with. We don't have one conglomerate that has control in
I
Illinois.
don't think
So
that matters.
I was just curious, what is it for Peoria then? What cybersecurity?
We have the same
I mean,
cybersecurity.
like a person that literally comes
That's
in and
internal
looks
stuff. Yeah.
at this to see
County
what's
IT.
in the
Yeah,
system.
county IT.
County.
But let's be clear here. County IT is not coming and touching any of our voting equipment. What he's talking about has nothing to do with our voting equipment. What he's talking about is voter registration, and
I know,
these are
but-
2 completely separate things.
That's what I was talking about though, is looking in the machine, looking at the guts, seeing what's in there.
That's done at the state level and the federal level when that is certified. And that has to go through that process, which is a very rigorous process at both levels before we can even purchase that and look at it. So it is
So
going
where-
through that process.
So does
So
that
where
make
are they going to are they physically looking at the machine, and where are they looking at the machines?
I think that
Not just at the company had somebody say that it was certified, but is somebody actually looking
yes,
at our machines, and where do they look at
in
them?
Springfield. They go and they have to go through the whole process at Springfield. There's a whole board within the State Board of Elections that certifies election equipment, not just the equipment, but any update that you do.
Okay, so that's who I want to know. Who
Yes.
is that? Who is
The
that?
State Board of Elections.
Oh, so Okay, so I would have to ask them who's actually looking at the machines.
I think his
to
name is
certify
Kyle
them.
Thomas, is in charge of the program.
The testing, or
Yes.
the certification program.
Then at a local
Is that
level,
the EAC that you're,
That's the
Part of
federal
it?
level.
okay.
and then I guess for my county too, again, I have that advantage that the company in Tremont, they're the ones that have made the equipment and that are selling it to me, so I have the advantage of it's Ken Gibson, Liberty Systems, right there in Tremont.
So,
You can go to the building and take a look at it.
I think the gist of it is that the machines are uploading equipment, all that stuff is air gapped. It's safe and secure, so it never actually touches where an easy way for someone to then get into those systems was if they were hooked up to an internet connection. And then you're able to backload in that information, be able to
But-
get access to that firmware that was actually operating and running the equipment. Since the machines don't touch an internet connection, they're all self-contained. The memory cards are all self-contained. They never see any of this.
Okay,
There's
but
there's
like-
file safes built and gap built. You'll be finished. Built the gaps into this so that they are protected, so that there's not giving them an opportunity to be able to do nefarious activities.
okay, sorry.
That's okay.
I just had like a whole comment that just kept getting
That's all right.
cut off. So, and now I just forgot what I
No.
was saying.
Sorry.
So Hart, I assume Hart comes here sometimes and they do things with our machines.
No,
Someone-
we do everything internally. Now, if there is something wrong with the equipment, we will send it off to be fixed. And that's part of that process.
And they didn't come and help with setup or anything like that.
We had a project manager that came in who did not only training with us, but acceptance testing on our equipment. So we run through a set of XYZ to make sure that we are taking in equipment that's working properly.
And then, I guess, I always fall back as well. The reassurance is the 5% random drawn audit after the election. Because if you are attempting manipulation, what are you manipulating? You're manipulating a major election. You're not manipulating one that falls through. So the 5% audit is testing that to find out, has there been manipulation on that? And the 5% audit extends out to our vote by mail equipment tabulators. One of them has to be part of it. Our early vote, one of them has. So it's not like you get to skip over one of the three major processes of counting votes. They're all part of that 5% audit, and each one of them is at least touched by the 5% to make sure that that election can be provable there. And if there is ever a question, we frequently have elections throughout the state of Illinois that are so narrow that they get down to having forced recounts. Those happen every election cycle. We don't always hear about them. 2018, it was in Decatur. They had to, the sheriff's race was decided by one vote, so they had to do an audit. DuPage County was the most recent, I believe. Well, no,
It's still
Springfield had it just this last election, Sangamon County. So throughout the state, these pockets pop up. So if there was some foreign entity trying to change, let's say, a presidential election, that 5% audit, that's on every one of those ballots in the 5%. If you're trying to change a local race, each one of them is pulled within that 5% audit. But beyond that, all these counties that have to have physical recounts because of very close elections, president's on every single one of those ballots. We would find those type of discrepancies through that process. And then as far as part of this process that comes up questioning that too is the ability for individuals to double vote. And how can we prove that that can't take place? And I don't think what the public knows necessarily is that behind the scenes after an election, we scan in all of your voter history, and any discrepancies that come up, which always come up, that somebody has voted twice, has to be explained. Now, most of the time for me, it ends up being the election judge marked Frank Thomas Sr. instead of Frank Thomas Jr., and we're able to realize that and fix that. Okay, they both voted, they just accidentally checked Senior twice. But anything where there's a voter that has two same voter histories being uploaded is a flaw that we have to report to the state. So it's not just the 5%. We have to upload your history and notify them of anything that is wrong in that voter history as it's being uploaded as well.